Hey, everybody. Welcome in. We're going to give people a few minutes to join the webinar, and then we're going to get started. In the meantime, if you'd like, please put your location of where you're joining us from in the chat. And if you look at the bottom, there's a chat, place to put your stuff in the chat, and you could select if you want to send it to host and panelist or everybody. So you could hit everyone on your location. California, awesome. And then for our Q&A, there's a Q&A box that's specific for questions. Please feel free to put stuff in the chat during the webinar. Any question that comes to mind, please drop that in the Q&A box. Okay, Tennessee, Iowa, Vegas, Florida, amazing. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce our session. Here we go. Okay, thanks everybody for joining and welcome to today's webinar, AI in Action. I'm Chanie Gluck, CEO and founder of 4D Global. And I'm thrilled to have you all here as we dive into everything you need to know about AI in RCM. And I'm excited to introduce you to Nishant Mathew. He is our 4D Global CTO. We're going to have an open and practical conversation about AI, automation, and compliance in today's RCM world. If you're searching for a simple way to make your operations smoother, you'll have a clearer, real-world perspective on how automation can help you and a step-by-step process and how to assess and get ready to automate different areas of your business. Okay, Nishant.
Thank you for that intro, Connie. I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us during this time and giving us an hour of your time. We really appreciate that. What we wanted to accomplish today was give you all a sense of how do I look at AI as a strategic element in my business? How do I create momentum? How do I create velocity in my workflows within my teams and ultimately the business? So we're taking some of the things that we're learning at 4D Global and some of the initiatives that we have kicked off inside of our business and the workflows that we have picked, and trying to share some of that knowledge with our peers and customers in the space so that you all can kind of learn from what we're learning. And we hope that this will be super beneficial to you, but more importantly, how can you put this into practice yourselves and as you look around in driving momentum in your RCM business. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right in. So the larger challenge nowadays, if you're on this call, you're probably inundated with a lot of tools and companies out there that are really, fast-pacing AI into RCM. Some have some seriously outlandish claims of we've solved RCM completely, all the way to like we have this one thing that AI can take away and reduce your, the amount of manpower that you're applying to that workflow. But the general sense, though, is that somehow that AI is a magical service. And I think that's where we are kind of also seeing that, and we want to sort of like try to navigate that a little bit. It does seem magical. I mean, when you prompt into ChatGPT and you get this beautiful response out, with some cases visuals, it does seem magical, right? So we don't want to take away that beauty and what we've achieved with this new technology, but it's not pure magic in the sense that it's coming out of nothing. It is coming from somewhere. So we want to take some of the mystery and ethereal experience of AI here with this webinar. And the key that we want to sit here and really come from a place of it is not that AI is broken. It's that it's just being misapplied. And what we really need to understand is what is the correct way of understanding what is possible and therefore what can be applied in our workflows in our business on a day-to-day basis. So right off the bat, I want to get something really straight with you all. Number one is that AI is not equal to LLM. So LLMs are large language models. That's the ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexities, their chatbot as well. It really is important to understand the difference between these two concepts to really understand how to deploy AI into your organizations. So I want to get that out of the way. So really want to hone in on this. AI is a broad field, and it's really about building systems, which you all are very familiar with. We've been building systems for decades now, right? And AI as a whole is a combination of all of those elements. So it could be automation, it could be a set of logic that you're applying, when you're processing an Excel financial report, right? That's AI. There's some element of intelligence and logic that you're applying, to these two cells, these two rows, and you're creating that output. Any kind of rules, all right? So if this condition, then this is the thing you need to do. If it is that condition, do this. Over the last decade, we've been talking a lot about machine learning, which has sort of been like the precursor to this AI revolution, which is really about what is the data telling us? So we're driving these models to really look at the data that we've been collecting for all these years and really trying to understand what is the pattern, what can we predict from the data that we're seeing. And as you're all probably familiar with, we've also had a lot of bots, RPAs. All of this comprises what we would call AI. It's like all these systems brought together and you're creating this sort of like artificial intelligence, right? That is operating on behalf of something, right? So that you don't have to do that particular work manually. So AI is a broad field, right? LLM is a subset of that, and it's really focused on language. I think the most beautiful expression of what technology can do is really understand the nuance of language because language is so complex. It's very local based. There's jargon, there's slang, there's all sorts of things in the way we apply it. Acronyms. This is my favorite thing in my tech world. We love acronyms, and sometimes we've acronymed our way into like not really understanding what are we talking about at the end of the day. LLM being one of them. And so really what these LLMs have tried to do is that they've taken these large data sets of human language, right? And they're predicting and generating these human-like responses to the point that they're even able to, like if you've used the ChatGPT voice interaction, they add in the ums and the well, if you want to, they're adding these intonations. So we've really come a long way with this, and LLM has been a huge order of magnitude in advancement with AI. But the beauty of LLM is also this element, which is pattern recognition, summarization, and reasoning. Now, this is an area that gets the confusion out there, by the way. I just want to point that out, which is because it can recognize patterns, like say if you throw data at the LLM, it's going to come back with what it sees as a pattern, right? And so we think that that is AI. And yes, there's a certain element of truth to that, but it's not in the way that you're thinking that it might be. In other words, the LLM is not necessarily an accountant or a CPA or a tax lawyer that is going to give you actual financial advice on that financial report, right? Because it's not necessarily trained on that domain specific knowledge. So LLMs are generally broad in that sense. Again, they're trying to see what is the pattern in the human language and what is the probable response to that, to what the data is that you're feeding it. And this is an important element when you're learning to deploy AI into your systems, is really understanding that LLMs have its specific purpose in your workflows. Not saying that LLMs don't have a place. We're saying that it needs to be contextualized where it works into your workflows. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. I'm going to try and illustrate this with a diagram here. So this is what we are very familiar with all the chatbots out there, right? The user is at the center of this, and the user will prompt. So you put in a prompt and you say, tell me, why the Dow Jones Industrial Average is going down today, right? And it's going to go search the web and it's going to pull in all that information. So the first thing that the LLM tries to do is that it tries to understand what is the person asking for, what is the context. So if I were to put down DGIA, it has to now understand, oh, it's talking about DGIA, meaning the financial market, right? It's not speaking about something else. not a medical term or something else. I'm not telling it, hey, I'm going to give you a financial question here or a financial market question here. It's about the DJI. We're not providing that context. We're just setting out saying, hey, why is the DJI going down today? So that's a what we would call a general purpose LLM, like GPT-4, Claude, all those LLMs out there. What that LLM then does is it starts to understand the user's query and breaks it up, and then feeds it to some kind of a task orchestrator. And then that task orchestrator goes and then it tries to pull in all this information and try to process that information. So in an RCM code, medical coding type space, we might have a model that does code prediction. We may have a model that does denial reason classification and prior auth detection. As prior auth detection, we may have an automated task here that extracts data from a PDF. And all it does, again, that's an automation, right? But there's no reasoning happening. All we're doing is pulling data out of that PDF and feeding that into this model. So once these models then come back with their answers, all of that goes into another LLM, right? That takes all this data, compiles it, and sends that output out into human readable output. And that's what the user sees in that beautiful text thing generator that you see, in your user interfaces. So this is kind of it's a very simplified, I'll grant you, but this is kind of what's happening in the background. Okay, it's not that the LLM is doing the work. It's that there's sub things that are happening that are specific in domain knowledge and really bringing that information back in. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. The idea is that LLMs are used in conjunction with other AI, with other automation, with bots, with agents, with logic, with so many different things are in play that's giving you this beautiful response at the end of it. Okay. I hope that is making sense now. And the key to remember is that AI models don't learn truth. They don't know what truth is. They learn patterns in data. So, I remember my comp sci professor in college saying garbage in, garbage out, GIGO, right? That was the first thing that they try to teach us, when it comes to computer science and programming, is that if you're putting in garbage, it doesn't really matter, what your processing looks like, you're going to get garbage at the end of it. AI is similar in that sense, in that it has no understanding of the world on its own. We're basically teaching it and training it to understand what's happening with that data that we're feeding it. So it's really important that whatever you put in as input is probably what you're going to get out as output. So you really need to have a good sense, is your data good? So one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to give you all a sort of a decision-making structure. So you want to take on an AI project, either you're trying to do that inside of your business or you're working with a partner. There's so many different ways of, actually implementing this, but we kind of wanted to give you all three areas to really focus on. And again, this is not the end-to-end elements of an AI project. What we're trying to get you all to focus in on, what are those specific things that I need to be aware of to put this into play. Okay, so the first thing is outcomes. Like, what is the exact value that you're trying to create by doing this particular project? And what I mean by that is, like, what is it that you're trying to do? Like, one of the first questions I ask all the time is, well, what does that end product look like? What is the deliverable? What is the thing you want to see happen as a result of this work, right? So it's really important to get a clear understanding of that, as opposed to just simply, well, I just want to do this, right? And instead, we need to really see what the value is in doing the work, because there is a cost to doing that work and getting there. So it really is important to understand, are we getting the kind of outcome that delivers on the type of value that we expect to create? The second area is training. And this, I can't stress this enough. This is like the most important element in any AI project, whether you're working with a vendor who's providing you with the AI tool, or if you're utilizing it on the inside. Do you have the domain expertise, meaning that do you have the right data, and do you have the ability to provide feedback back into that system so you can improve it? Because on day number one, it's not going to be ready to go. It's probably on day 10, day 20, day 30. That's when it starts to get better as it's trained in that particular domain. The third thing, which is kind of important, but I'm not speaking about governance in terms of like the ethics or the compliance laws, even though we will talk a little bit about it. But you have to be aware of the fact that by utilizing AI, logic, models, at the end of the day, you are responsible. So you need to understand what is happening inside of your machine so that when it comes to oversight, audits, any type of escalation that needs to be taking place, how that is going to play out. If you're not maintaining that on a baseline level, then when an audit does come into place, you're going to find that you're going to have some issues. So these are the three things that you really need to think about from a decision-making standpoint. Like, what do I have in these areas? So let us dive into each one. So the first thing I want to talk about is outcomes. And I want to be very clear here. Output does not equal outcomes. Okay. So you can have a particular output or a set of outputs, but you're not quite there with the outcome. You've got the output, and now you probably need to do something else with it to generate the outcome that you're looking for. Okay. But what can help you? You can start to determine getting that output faster to get to the outcome if you understand the rules of the game. So going to get a little bit technical here. I apologize for that, but hopefully this will sort of set the stage for what are the sort of challenges that we have in the decision making that we have to do when it comes to these automation and AI type projects. And that is deterministic and non-deterministic logic. Okay, this is really important to understand when you're trying to deploy AI that actually works. And I'm hoping that the next visual will really sink this in, which is you are the person trying to make a decision on a task or a workflow or a certain part of your business that you're really wanting to get into and generate some momentum and productivity. The real question that you have to ask is it rule driven? Meaning that if I have a set of rules, right, I will get to the output that I'm looking for, right? So look at an Excel spreadsheet, for instance. If I take column B and minus column C, which is revenue minus expenses, I get my profit, right? It's always going to be the same. It's going to be the same for all rows. It's regardless of whether, it's row B, row C, row G, row H. It doesn't matter. It's the same output all the time. Those types of situations are very ideal for automation. You're right there. It's easy to go. And this is something you really don't need to think too much about. If it is rule driven, right? And when I say rule driven, also, it can be as many rules as possible too. There's no limit to rules. So that can like, there's no range like, well, if it's 1 to 10 rules, do this. If it's 10 to 30 rules, there's nothing like that. There's no limit to rules because there's a clear output at the end of it. Because I know that if it matches a certain condition, this is the output. So hopefully that's very straightforward. It's very ideal for automation. Now, if you look at reasoning-driven type situations where I have to look at unstructured, just data that's all over the place, and I need to figure out what are the possibilities that can happen as a result of all these inputs, right? So you're trying to make sense. And somewhere in there, right, requires somebody to tell you, yep, that's the answer. So you can have AI and LLMs and all that sort of help you figure out what are the three best possible scenarios that we can get out of this data, right? And then from there you choose which one's the best. Now, what we suggest is that that's where that human judgment comes into place, right? The human comes in and sort of assists the AI in that sense to really hone in, this is what you're looking for. So again, if you're looking for clear output, like no matter what, that's automation. If it requires a set of responses or going through a number of reasoning steps, then you probably need to go down a reasoning-driven path, which, by the way, this is deterministic and this is non-deterministic. Non-deterministic means I cannot possibly determine the exact outcome. Deterministic means I know exactly the outcome. So hopefully that makes sense with what I mean by deterministic. And we've just got a simple table here between how you make choices with deterministic and non-deterministic. If the output is predictable, it's deterministic. If it's probabilistic, right, then it's going down the non-deterministic path. Deterministic always works best for fixed rules, validations, mappings. This field is this field. It's always this field. It's not going to change. If it's a judgment call, if there's some pattern recognition that we need to see and somebody needs to make a decision to go to the next step, then you're going down the non-deterministic path. In terms of needing a human in the loop, right? Needing a human in that workflow. Either if it's rarely, it's deterministic. If it's often, then that's where the non-deterministic play comes in. So like checking a database, date of birth format. I know that a date of birth format in the United States is always going to be month, day, year format. I know that as a fact of life. If it's an international standard, I know it's probably day, month, year. But again, outside of that, there's not that much variation, right? Unless we have like July 28th, 2025, something like that, right? But still, all those are still rule-based. We can follow that in a deterministic way and have a standard set of formats for our dates. But when we were talking about assigning a medical code from a narrative note, well, there could be some different possibilities there, and we need to narrow it down to what is the best possible um, output from these scenarios. All right, for deterministic tasks, there's nothing to think about. Automate, 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 right? So when you're looking at your workflows, if there's an area where you're like, we know exactly what the output is going to be, we're going to be automating like crazy. Eligibility, form validations, fee schedule lookups, EOB, PDF extractions, work allocation. There's nothing to reason here. Just pull the data and make it happen. And just to give you sort of like some use cases around here, like say you're drafting appeals and letters, you can use tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini. It's great, right? I mean, this is really where these types of LLMs really shine, is if you give it a certain set and a template for a draft letter, it can pull that up very quickly. For SOP generation and summaries, you could use like tools like Notion AI, Microsoft Copilot, Grammarly Go. I used Grammarly Go recently. I was pretty impressed with how it um, how it how it works when generating text and documentation. Pretty phenomenal. Data entry support. This is a little bit higher level of automation. If you're looking at, getting data out of systems or getting data from an EHR or Availity or practice management systems, and you want to process that data, you might use something like UiPath or like the workflow automation tools, Zapier or N8N. So just to give you a sense of what automations could look like, this is a suite of tools that you could utilize for these particular use cases. Again, the list is infinite, by the way. These are just a few. Okay, so the real thing is for non-deterministic tasks, what we say is that augment your humans. And when I mean humans, I'm really talking about your subject matter experts, by the way. Augment them with AI. So you're looking at this beautiful partnership between your subject matter experts and these AI tools to be able to define and sort of judge what is the best scenario to move forward. And I want to mention that at 4D, we believe that this is the powerful equation right here, and this is the greatest opportunity in the RCM space right now, is to really raise up our human experts and bring AI along to help them produce faster and gain that momentum that everyone's looking for. So I hope this makes sense. Outcomes is really important if you understand how to get to the output you're looking for. Okay, so these are the rules of the game. If you understand that you're dealing with a deterministic workflow where there's a clear output, automate. If it's not that clear, that's where you use AI and bring in human experts to help you get there. All right. So I want to dive into medical coding. That's sort of a real world use case that we wanted to play around with. The question that we're asking is, should it be rule-based? It kind of seems like it should be rule-based, right? If this condition, this diagnostic code, pretty straightforward. But what makes it so hard to automate? Well, let's dive in. So everyone's pretty familiar with the pain out there, denials, coder shortages, rising compliance risk. And in medical coding, we see that there are a lot of folks are rushing into the AI. But really what we're suggesting is that how you do it will determine whether you gain an edge or if you're going to create more chaos for yourselves and actually increase your risk for an audit or compliance issues by going down this path. But again, the opportunity is there in that there is an opportunity to really gain some momentum here. So just to sort of set the stage here, AI models struggle when clinical documentation is vague or inconsistent, right? I mean, you've got all sorts of providers out there. They're trying to get the patient taken care of. Probably the last thing on their mind is creating that perfect note, right, that gets to the claim being paid and resolved. So it's generally vague, it's inconsistent. There's not necessarily a generally accepted way of talking about something. Again, it's human language, right? This is where LLMs have made a huge, you know, advancement in this area to really understand how humans communicate. Certain scenarios can have multiple valid interpretations. Is it enough with a note? Do you need the note and another piece of information, some data, some history to really understand what is going on with that particular use case, right? With that particular claim. And probably the bigger problem that we tend to see is that the underlying model, which is that AI model that we're training to be an expert on medical coding, it doesn't have enough exposure to edge cases. And this is a very big challenge because I mean, the RC healthcare space is so wide, so big, right? There's any number of things that could bring in terms of an edge case. A plus B equals Saturn, right? It's like, how do we get there? So that's kind of the things to really figure out how to make sure that your model is exposed to these types of cases so that you can get to the ideal conclusion. So again, back to the decision-making framework. We talked about outcomes. How do we get there? Now the question is about training. And we really want to dive into this because this is really where the rubber meets the road when you're trying to implement AI projects. So traditionally, we've had situations where in the EHR, you're looking at the clinical documentation, medical coders going in, logging into the EHR, and reviewing the code that probably an EHR rule-based engine or a machine learning engine determined based on a certain set of criteria. Medical coder reviews it, checks it's good to go, signs off on it, goes on. The other situation is where probably is happening quite a bit today, I would imagine, in that medical coder is looking at the clinical documentation, copying and pasting all that information into an LLM, and then seeing what it generates. What is the diagnostic code associated with it, right? I played around with this with our teams, and showed, well, Google Gemini says this, ChatGPT says this, Perplexity says this. Which one are you going to pick? And it was pretty interesting the scale of differences. And then you took another use case. This time, Gemini got it wrong, Anthropic got it right. So again, LLMs, you can't just feed the data directly into LLMs and then come up with an answer that's regular. Again, it's non-deterministic. So, but this is sort of the traditional scenario that tends to happen. What we're saying is to shift into this AI world, right? And how do you implement AI well? So what we're suggesting is that, again, remember I said there's an LLM on either side where it's trying to understand the query, trying to understand what is it that I'm trying to process. So your clinical documentation, which is either in your EHR or your PM, it's sent to this LM context generator, and it stores to understand that context of the data and the documentation, and then sends that to the coding model. So this is your coding model. This is your AI that you are interacting with, and that's the one that's actually giving you those suggested codes, right? It does its thing, it processes it, it suggests the code, sends it to the LLM. The LLM looks at it, okay, I get what you're saying. I'm going to create this nice little response so the coder can take it and review it. LLM then sends the response to the medical coder. The coder then selects it and edits it inside the PM and the EHR. And there you go. The clinical documentation is updated with the right codes. So this is probably the ideal scenario where we're looking for. But we're talking about training. So where does that fit in with all of this? And what we're trying to really go after is that training your model is the key. And I think the common misunderstanding about what AI does is that AI does not learn from being exposed to more and more things. It actually learns from correction. So think about, raising a child, for instance, right? We teach concepts to our children, but then as they apply it, they're probably not going to get it right the first time, the second time. And we're coming alongside and sort of saying, well, that's not quite right. You have to kind of like do this. So it's through that correction and that trying and failing and correcting sort of iteration is how the child gets better at learning concepts. AI is no different in that sense. So feeding the feeding the model raw notes and expecting it to just figure it out. It's like taking a textbook and saying to your kid, go figure it out, right? They'll probably figure some things out. They'll probably look at this in page 448 and page 389, might say something and something might click in, but is that enough, right? And what we're saying is that it's not. You need to be doing more than just feeding it raw data and expecting it to figure it out. So what does training actually involve? The model has to learn. what it got wrong, why it was wrong. This is really important because this is how you create that learning signal. And that's how it's, oh, I got it. Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern in the way I'm thinking, and there's a flaw there. What it should have done instead. I don't know if you've all have seen, some of these chat GPTs or Claude, where it'll give you two sets of answers and tell you which response was helpful. What is it trying to do? It's trying to see what is it getting right. And by the way, who's the subject matter expert at this point? You. And that's how it brings you back into the loop. So training isn't about ingestion, it's structured correction. So who does this? It requires that human in the loop. You have to have a subject matter expert in the loop for any of these AI projects that you're talking about. And that's where we get into the real crux of the matter, which is nuance and inference. Nuance is a very difficult thing to deal with. And remember, non-deterministic, right? So it's trying to determine what is the most probable answer out of the input that I've just received. So I'm inferring from the data that I'm looking at and making some suggestions here. So basically, we're writing a letter to medical coder Silly Rabbit. In medical coding, getting it right isn't just about the data; it's about what the data means, and that's what we're trying to get the rabbit to be better with. Is really what is going on with all the data. So here's an example. Patient is seen for DM and neuropathy. This is the clinician's input, right? So we've got the word DM or the acronym DM and neuropathy. And so the interpretation challenge here is that should the neuropathy be coded as a diabetic complication or a separate issue? It depends on the linkage. Maybe some of the data could suggest that. The clinical notes could suggest that. But again, there's some inference that we need to make here. And what's missing here is some data. And so we need to get the data from somewhere else, right? So a medical coder is sitting in front and they're like, wait, do I know that DM really means diabetes mellitus? And can I confirm that? Well, let me look over here. Let me look at diagnosis. Let me look at all these different information, and then I can make a potential coding outcome. So type 2 DM with diabetic neuropathy if related, type 2 DM without complications, or they could add idiopathic neuropathy if it is separate, right? So some multiple scenarios here. Somebody needs to make a decision on what's the best path forward. By the way, DM, again, is diabetes mellitus, is that consistent across the industry in the way it's utilized, right? Or does it mean direct message, right? So that's something to really understand. Again, this is the way we communicate as human beings. Here's another example where follow-up on SOB added LASIK. SOB, shortness of breath, correct. LASIK, likely a misspelling. Probably they meant LASIX, and probably something with congestive heart failure, and that's really what they meant. But the keyboard at the EHR, the hospital, did some autocorrect and said LASIK instead because it does not understand LASIK inside of its dictionary. So again, potential coding challenges here, right? So the risk is that AI may misinterpret LASIK and suggest codes like the ones I'm showing on the screen here. So again, it's challenging. Medical coding is a challenging area. And again, we want to highlight this, that AI doesn't fail because it's wrong. It fails because it doesn't understand nuance the way trained coders do. This is what the beauty is over so many years of medical coding professionals, is that they can understand the nuance of human language, the domain, and all that sort of things. And so, they can probably figure out SOB, shortness of breath, and they can say, is this generally accepted or not, right? And they can give that feedback back to the customer on how their providers are providing documentation, right? So because they know that, hey, we're noticing that you guys are using a lot of acronyms here, and probably we need to like reset on what those acronyms mean and make sure that we're all on the same page. Again, this is not a fault of AI. It's just how we work as human beings. So this is where we want to really hone in on the point. If the input data, which is where you're starting, right? If the input data and your training data are incomplete, biased, or noisy, the model will reflect, and this is sort of the scary part about AI, is going to amplify those flaws. Like it's really going to push that out. So if you've got a coder who doesn't know the difference, right? They're just going to go forward with whatever the AI suggested because there's a general trust that AI probably gets it right. They're probably right within a certain, tolerance level. But you got to really understand that if you're not feeding good training data into your models, it'll amplify these issues even more. Because remember, once they see a pattern, they're going to push that agenda forward. So what matters most? How you train it. So here are some things that you really need to be aware of as you are working through medical coding AI automation. What is the quality of clinical documentation that you're receiving today? Are you reviewing the reasoning steps behind arriving at a suggested code list? Are you scoring answers to help you understand confidence level? If you put in a code with a confidence level of 38%, you're probably not going to take that in. So that extra level of data just really helps you understand how to move forward. Now, if it comes back with an 88% confidence level, you know that you're probably closer than most. Context exposure. This is very, give it the edge case, give it those acronyms, shorthand of writing. Doctors tend to do a lot of shorthand, and the system really needs to understand how shorthand works in our domain. And here's probably the most important thing: build those feedback loops for your model to learn. So what is the ideal true scenario looks like is everything is the same. However, the central part is that your expert is training your model, and the code that was selected, right? It's going back into the model of saying why it was selected and how it was selected and how do we arrive at that? What's my steps of reasoning to get there? This is key to a successful AI project. So training ensures data quality, expands that model's context, and most importantly, then embeds that expert's feedback from your domain expert. So certified medical coders are really important to embed that into your workflow. So just a quick thing, like what does great training look like? Well, are you making progress? Because you're feeding all of this stuff and training it, but are you getting any of the outcome results? Remember, that was the first part in your decision making. So high first pass yield. On first pass, everything is looking great. If it's like you're at a 60, 70, 80% first pass rate, you're doing great. If you're at like a 18% after 6 months of training the model, you might have to look into some things like what's going on. Low coding edits. Your human reviewers are not spending a lot of time changing edits. And most importantly, few audit rejections and denials and such, right? You want that bigger outcome where you're reducing denial over time. All right. Just want to pause here real quick. Are there any questions that are coming up to mind, Kanye? Do we have anything that we want to maybe tackle real quick?
No, I think you keep going. But if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. I think this is good, valuable information for people to start thinking about how to implement it, where to implement AI. But if you have any specific questions, please drop them in the chat. But I think you keep going, Nishant.
Awesome. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about governance. Really want to focus in on the fact that governance is not about slowing down. A lot of people tend to think that once you bring governance in, everything is going to come to a crashing start. And what I'm really going to speak to is that it's not about putting in all these processes and guardrails and limiting your ability for the productivity gains that you wanted. It's now slowed down because you've got this governance framework that you need to implement. But really, it's about how you scale responsibly. And again, positioning yourself to have momentum and advancements, but not taking you 10 steps behind either, right? So what does that look like? We want to talk about three anchors: oversight, feedback integration, audit, and monitoring. So in your system, every prediction that you make, you should be able to trace it to how and why it was made. Hope that's pretty self-explanatory. You should understand that any prediction that was made by your AI with your human, whatever the case may be, that there's traceability on how those things were arrived at. What that does is that there's transparency. You're maintaining transparency, and when that human review is required, when your AI is not going the way it's supposed to go. The second anchor, feedback integration. You need to make sure that your human corrections are structured into those learning loops. Again, it's central to any AI project is how are your human experts integrated into those feedback loops? Take those people out and only leave it to your tech teams. You're probably not going to get the kind of outcomes that you're looking for. I'm going to touch upon this real quick. Drift monitoring is something that really needs to be paid attention to. What happens over time with your AI models is that they tend to drift away from any changes. There's a new medication in the industry and it's doing great for diabetes, and now all of a sudden it's being shown in the clinical notations. But guess what? Your AI is refusing to change and still on the old stuff, right? So AI needs to constantly be adjusted and make sure that it's going along with the industry and with time, and it's not stuck in learnings and understandings from 10 years ago. Okay. So, and by the way, rules evolve as well. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that, insurance rules around diagnostic codes, all those things could change over time. So it cannot stick to what it was taught a year ago or even 6 months ago for that matter. So why governance can't be optional? We're just sort of like throwing this out there. There are quite a few risk categories, but a couple of ones that I want to really highlight. The legal compliance, this cannot be stressed enough. Audits. You have to be rock solid and be able to answer those audits because there's so many issues and legal outcomes that could happen as a result. But I think the bigger thing is that you're trying to gain momentum, right? So what is the one thing you cannot have happen? You can't frustrate your coders, because if your coders are spending more time um, sort of correcting the AI and the AI is simply not learning, then you're just going to lead to more frustration. And over time, people are just going to lose interest in utilizing that tool. And probably the biggest thing that you could lose is coder or client trust, right? You really want to make sure that you are really understanding what's going on with the output and the outcome of your AI processes, so that you can again increase trust with your teams and increase trust with your clients. All right. So we just want to kind of like give you all a sense of like, okay, this is a lot of information, Nishant. Thank you for the technical, and the rabbit was a good touch, but yikes. But we wanted to give you all a sense of like, where do I go from here? What do I do? Well, like, how do I begin this process? So we just want to give you a few things. What we really want to communicate to you all is that there's a natural urge for us to jump in without thinking. And what we want to sort of encourage is that first, and again, jumping is absolutely part of the process, but in the beginning, invest in readiness. So what we're saying is that assess your AI maturity. What do we mean by this? Are your workflows standardized? Do you have quality benchmarks? Do you know your denial patterns? Like, do you have an understanding of your manual processes, right? Because without that, going to AI is not going to solve anything, right? Because you need to be because remember, it's all about your subject matter expertise and your partner's subject matter expertise to be able to get you there with the utilization of AI. So what we're saying is, I start with a maturity assessment, and we've come up with hopefully a straightforward and a simple maturity assessment evaluator. And what we're saying is that these are probably like 5 stages where different companies are operating in. And definitely everyone is probably in this stage for sure, which is a manual process, right? This is where the traditional RCM company that has been utilizing human agents, human manual QA. What do you do in this stage if you're in this stage? Well, you're not looking at a lot of technology or a lot of automation or a lot of things in AI. You're probably just trying to optimize that and making sure that it works as intended. So the next step for you from a maturity standpoint is, now I have SOPs, I have audits, I have benchmarks, I know my baseline numbers, I know how much am I processing, how much am I getting to claim resolution. In this level, you're probably doing some automation. I'm pretty sure that you're using Excel, you're using Google Sheets, you're using some kind of reporting engine, QuickBooks, whatever, right? You're using some automation, and you might be also utilizing tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini, but you're doing it in such a way that it's assistive. They're not domain experts. ChatGPT, they're not RCM domain experts. So they're just providing assistive. So, in several slides ago, I talked about building denial letters and building appeal letters, right? Doesn't require a lot of domain knowledge. It's like, here's the information, get me a denial letter. So it's very helpful in that regard. What we see as a challenge for a lot of companies is going from level 2 to level 3. This is where you start the process of actually being able to give feedback to the AI model so that you're now training it. You're not just, it's not one directional, right? It's a bi-directional relationship now where you're looking at your workflows and you are trying to make sure that the responses and the suggestions they get better over time. So you're actually contributing to that model and its betterment. So what are you doing at this stage from an automation standpoint? You're automating high value workflows. You're not going to focus on low value. You're going to focus on high value at this stage. And you're trying to get to smart and hopefully better suggestions. The next level is integrated. This is where you're looking at your entire RCM business and you're like, how can I get this? So I did this in coding. Yay. I did this in pre-auth. Yeah. How do I now do this in all other aspects of it? So there's a cross-functional AI coordination that's happening across your RCM business. Now, the key here, though, in integrated is really about shared intelligence. What can my coding help me with denials? What can my pre-auth help me with billing? All that, how's that intelligence being shared around? That's that level of integration that's really awesome. And then there's level 5, which is at this point, you have got end-to-end, your humans and your AI are kicking butt. You've got business-wide AI orchestration. And guess what? You're real-time tuning your AI models on the fly. Governance is happening, in real time. These are not like outside. Everything's working as intended. And we didn't put a level 6, but a level 6 would be your entire business is running on AI, right? There's no humans involved, which would be incredible if that happens one day, but that remains to be seen here. So hopefully this sort of sets the stage for you to figure out, where am I on this? Am I a level 1? Am I a level 2, a level 3? What do I need to do if I'm at level 2? What do I need to do to get to a level 3? So to help you with that, build an implementation checklist. What are we suggesting? Just start with some use cases in your business. Where can I see AI assisting and where can I see AI acting? Feedback loop. Can in these processes, can my experts disagree and improve the system? Audit trail. Can you trace errors? And then in that workflow or that use case, what level of maturity am I operating for that use case? Am I operating at a level 1, level 2, level 3? Where am I? Right? So you could take one workflow, get it all the way to level 3, take the next workflow, get it all the way to level 3, so on and so forth. And probably the most important thing is like skills and resources. Do I have the skills and resources in my team or in my partner to level up? Because this is a bit of an evolutionary step in our industry, right? So do I have those skills and do I have those resources to get this done? So it's a simple implementation checklist. Do I have what is the basics to be able to do what I need to get done? And what we're again suggesting is that start small, but learn fast. There's no silver bullet when it comes to implementing AI in your workflows. So look for iterative learning. Just like the AI would learn, you learn as well. So pick one high value, a high volume, low complexity, because you don't want to pick a very high complex task to begin with, right? Set a baseline so that you understand accuracy, rework rates, and your experts. Like they need to give their confidence and say, yeah, we're 60% confident, we're 20% confident. Use no code platforms for automation like Zapier, right? There's no need to go and hire a tech company and start building out a development team. Just start with a no-code platform like Zapier does. And then run a 6 to 8 week test with your experts and QA involved in that feedback loop, and then see what you're learning from it. Every week, sort of look back at the plan. What did we learn from this week of testing? And I think probably the thing that really we want to stress is that this is really about a cultural play, if anything else. AI really gets better when your team, your people are invested in making it better. So again, as I said earlier, you cannot bolt on AI to a bad process or a bad culture. So train humans to work with the system, not just around it. And when your experts disagree, capture that and then use them to evaluate, teach the AI, and most importantly, build trust with your teams, build trust with your clients. So at 4D, we're investing in this journey. We're not just about building models, we're ensuring that our people, our processes, and also our governance are in place to make them safe and valuable. So really want to thank you all for being a part of this conversation as we shared some of our insights, and want to open it up to ask us anything.
Okay, awesome. Nishant, that was very comprehensive. Great job. You really, I think, gave people a lot to think about. And Christy asked uh, where we can get copies of the slides. Best webinar I've heard this year. Thank you so much. That's awesome. You will receive the slides in an email. I believe Paul later today or tomorrow. So look out for an email from us, and we'll send that to you. Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
Connie, do you have any questions?
Um, you and I talk all the time, and and we actually, I think we've made tremendous progress in what we do. Um, Somebody asked, okay, how can your company help other RCM companies? So, Nishant, should I speak about that or,
I would say that's yeah.
okay. So I think that it's important to understand the volume of what you have because yes, we're building tech, we're building automations for our clients all the time. But if you're just looking at one small practice, chances are you may not have the volume that it takes to get an ROI on creating a workflow. So I think it has a lot to do with that with volume and how much you have of a specific issue that we could easily solve it with a workflow or some kind of tool. But Nishant, why don't you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's so well, first of all, doing webinars like this, right? What we want to do is try to do a little bit of a sneak peek into what we're learning, as we're putting these things into practice. I don't think anybody has figured it all out yet. I just want to be very clear about that, okay? So all this is iterative learning, and we're learning as we go along. The thing about it is that I don't think this is the first time we've been here, right? The real challenges, and I want to answer this question that Christina also did, like what parts of the RCM process are most vulnerable to inefficiency without AI support? And I think this is the kind of the real question that's at play, right? It's like there are inefficiencies in RCM. There are, the costs are spiraling out of control, right? And we've got a lot of people doing a lot of things, but not necessarily knowing what is exactly that they're doing. And are we getting to the kinds of outcomes that we're looking for? Are we looking at productivity in terms of processing claims, or are we looking at claim resolution? Because at the end of the day, that's the value, that's the high value marker right there. So what are we doing to get there? So I think that you know, how all of us can help each other is sort of like really getting out and doing these things and putting those learnings out there for all of us to learn from each other and really helping that community sort of evolve in this sense. But I think the real challenge here is that one of the big problems that we have is data interoperability, right? EHRs are not open. Some of the payer systems are not open out there. And so what we have is that we've got data sitting in various systems, but nothing is actually bringing it all together to make sense of it, right? So there is that challenge. And I think that part of what we spend a lot of time in with our humans is just getting the information. So and by the way, the value is not in that. The value is in actually getting it to claim, like what are the steps to get it to resolve? And I think the you're going to really set yourself up if you're only thinking about, well, how do I get data? How am I integrating with systems? You really got to be honing in on the key element, which is resolving that claim for your customer, because that's the real high value target. So that vulnerability will be a big challenge that if you're not thinking about that, that's why I started. What is the outcome you're looking for? If your outcome is to just touch it 10 times a week, you'll get there with automation, no problems, right? If you want to touch it 300 times a month, no problems there with automation. Um, the key is though, what are you doing to resolve the claim for the customer? And so that's that vulnerability that we are trying to attack full frontal.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions coming in the chat, but it needs to go in the Q&A section so we could see them and answer them easily, but I'm gonna just touch on a few. Um, Eric gave a bunch of questions about does 4D Global use AI for collections? We absolutely do. And what departments use AI and what is the process AI is integrated in to improve workflow? Um, these are all like big questions. And how can we integrate LLM? Um, I think, like Nishan said, you really need to pick just one piece of the process first
Yes.
and figure out what is your biggest pain point, where do you spend the most money, where do you spend the most time,
Yeah.
and highlight that and focus on just one thing.
Yeah.
Nishant, would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's an exercise out there that I highly recommend for folks is to really think of your processing line as a production line. Look at it from end to end, all the way from customer onboarding to the end, right? Which is money in the bank. And see where is your team coming in? How much time are they spending in? Where is value being created, right? And then sort of like in the areas where I'm spending the most time in and generating the least amount of value, well, guess what? That's something you need to automate as quickly as possible. If you have something where that is taking a lot of time and generating the highest value, that's where you need to bring your human experts in and sort of understand now how can we make that process better? Like what can I do to help you? Like if the human expert for them it takes 40 minutes to just get the data, right? And then they make a decision. Well, that's one claim per hour if you think about it, right? So what can we do to speed those things up? So high value where you're generating value in your workflow in your production line, those are the areas you really want to focus first with when it comes to AI. When it comes to automation, like again, like I said, anything that is creating low value but taking up a lot of your time with your team, automate like crazy as much as possible. But things that are the other way around, where it's like high value but also high effort or high amount of time that it's taking, think about how AI can help you there with
Okay.
your humans.
Okay, that's perfect. Lindsay asked, is there an AI tool that could help find current addresses for patients?
Oh yeah, that's been around for some time. There's so kind of like drawing a blank with there's plenty of systems out there that do that.
You could probably
And
put
the
it in
change of addresses
ChatGPT
tend
and
to
find out what tool. I would
yeah
just ask ChatGPT
yeah.
what tool could help you find patient
It's
address.
Smarty, was it Smarty addresses or something? I'm trying to like what was it? Yeah, so there's two problems with addresses, right? Getting the right address, so that things get to the get to the right place. Number one, and number two is change of addresses and things changing over time, right? Because people move or whatever the case may be. Yeah, there's tons of those. I wouldn't call those AI tools. I think those are just more of like automation type things that you could integrate with.
But if you're still mailing patient statements, I would recommend using products that do text and have seen a lot of success with companies like Raxia and Box Health,
Yep.
can certainly help you without having to use traditional mail systems. Where Hector wants to know where I could obtain more information on tools.
What a
That's
great question.
a loaded question.
Um, well, I mean, there's no, well, Hector, let me assure you, there's no shortage of the tool list. Every day, I think every week, like 10 tools are being added to the list. Um, this is where I think the community really comes into play, is trying out tools and sort of like communicating out as to what is working and what is not working. I want to just throw out a little bit of important context here. So AI companies tend to process. Remember, I started out with like, it's magic as a service, right? And that's necessary for the sales pitch, right? So grace and forgiveness for that. But the idea though that you need to be very careful with is that if you go too deep with one AI tool and in 6 months they're not around, what then? Right? If you build all your tools on top of OpenAI or ChatGPT, and ChatGPT does something to stop you from accessing its services like that, what happens to your business? Right. So be thinking about those kinds of things as well in tool selection. Are they going to be around in 6, 7, 8 months time? Because by the way, it takes that long to get in with a tool and starting to see real value. It takes about 4, 5, 6, 8 months before you know that it's going to give you. So are they going to be around in 8 months, right? Well, what's their burn rate, so to speak?
Awesome. Okay, last question. How can your company help other RCM companies? I would say that schedule a call. There's a webinar feedback survey, and we will have someone get in touch with you and we can talk more about that.
Awesome.
Okay, this was great. Very, very good interaction. Lots of great questions. Stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. There should be a webinar feedback survey up on your screen. Please complete that. You'll also get this in an email. We really love to hear your feedback. We love to hear how you enjoyed the webinar and what other topics you would like us to cover. So thanks, everybody, and I hope to see you next time. Look, this is an ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah.
We're all learning together. So thanks for joining us,
Yes.
and
Thank you.
we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.